This is Dateline News and Conversation. This is a special edition, an op-ed. The USA and its vassals have been repeating the mantra that Russia's special military operation in Ukraine was unprovoked. The controlled media repeat this endlessly in every article about the conflict in Ukraine. In order to expose this lie, it is necessary to consider the historical context of what constitutes a provocation. This is the purpose of this video. Let us begin with the 1917 Russian Revolution, orchestrated and funded by the powerful financial actors in the West. Was this not a provocation? And for what purpose? On August 6th and 9th, 1945, Harry S. Truman dropped the atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, not to end the war, for Japan was already suing for peace, but to send a message to Joseph Stalin, who was the boss. Was this not a provocation? On February 9th, 1990, the United States Secretary of State James Baker promised Mikhail Gorbachev that NATO would not move 1 inch eastward toward Russia. The U.S. broke that promise almost immediately in 1994 under Bill Clinton, expanding to several former Soviet republics and Eastern European countries by placing nuclear missiles in Poland and Romania. Was this not a provocation? In 1991, George H.W. Bush plotted the breakup of Russia. He dispatched NGOs, the National Endowment for Democracy, NED, George Soros's Open Society Foundation, and the Harvard economists Larry Summers and Jeffrey Sachs to impose the shock therapy on the Russian economy. This led to the privatization of Russia's assets, the creation of a class of oligarchs, mass unemployment, the non-payment of wages and pensions, violent crime, and millions of deaths. Was this not a provocation? In the 1996 election, when the very unpopular Boris Yeltsin was expected to lose, President Bill Clinton invested millions of dollars in a widespread campaign to get their man, Yeltsin, elected. This was even featured on the cover of Time magazine with Yeltsin and the statement in bold print, "Yanks to the rescue." Was this not a provocation and a meddling in Russia's internal affairs? Yeltsin resigned the presidency on December 31st, 1999, and appointed the unknown Vladimir Putin as acting president. Putin was later elected in March of 2000, and this spelled the end of the U.S. attempt to rape and pillage the Russian economy and the theft of its resources. The U.S. would not forget. And then at the 2007 Munich Security Conference, Putin castigated the United States for repeated violations of international law and the UN Charter. He made this speech with the U.S. Senators John McCain and Joseph Lieberman staring at him from the front row. This speech made Vladimir Putin America's public enemy number one. Now, keeping in mind during these years was the U.S. NATO expansion surrounding Russia and the annual military exercises gaming a war and first strike on Russia. Each year, these war games expanded exponentially in number, scope, from the Black Sea to the Arctic. Were these not provocations? And what about the U.S. orchestrated and funded 2014 coup d'etat in Kiev? Again, with John McCain, Lindsey Graham, Victoria Nuland, then Ambassador Jeffrey Pyatt, encouraging the crowds on the Maidan. Was this not a provocation and a direct threat on Russia's doorsteps? When Crimea voted in a referendum on March 16, 2014, to return to Russia, the United States immediately claimed that Putin invaded and annexed Crimea, saying that Crimea rightfully belonged to Ukraine. But this completely ignores the historical context of how and why Crimea was illegally deeded to Ukraine during the Soviet era by Nikita Khrushchev in 1954. Almost immediately after the Maidan coup, Ukraine began what is now a 9-year war against Donetsk and Lugansk, two republics who opposed the coup, and the U.S. imposed Petro Poroshenko as president. This all-out war in the Donbas republics has resulted in some 14,000 deaths and massive damage to residential buildings, office buildings, churches, schools, hospitals, and infrastructure. These two republics are primarily ethnic Russians. Was this not another direct provocation, not only on the Russian-speaking population, but immediately on Russia's border? And then, in an attempt to stop the war in the Donbas, the Minsk agreements were signed on September 5th, 2014, between Russia, Ukraine, and the OSCE, with François Hollande from France and Angela Merkel of Germany as mediators. And then, in 2022, Poroshenko, Merkel, Hollande all admitted that the Minsk agreements were an attempt to buy time for Ukraine and a pro-Ukrainian, anti-Putin coalition to build up the U.S. NATO-backed Ukrainian army. Can anyone forget the massive Ukrainian buildup on the Donbas border in November of 2021? Russia responded with an equally large force deployed to Russia's borders. Was this not another direct provocation? In the following month, December 2021, President Putin presented Russia's security guarantees to the United States, NATO, the EU, and the OSCE, and these were completely ignored. 2 months later, on February 24th, 2022, Russia begins its special military operation in Ukraine with 3 goals. Number 1, to demilitarize Ukraine. Number 2, to denazify Ukraine. And number 3, to ensure a neutral Ukraine that would never be part of NATO and the EU. 7 months later, on September 26th, the Nord Stream pipelines were blown up. And 1 month later, on October 8th, the Kerch Bridge was attacked. Were these not direct attacks and provocations? During 2022, the United States, NATO, and the EU began gaslighting the world with a possible nuclear escalation of the conflict in Ukraine. Russia responded that it would use everything in its nuclear arsenal to defend the country. Was this not another ominous, reckless provocation? In May 2016, the U.S. launched a missile defense base in Poland. There are some 10,000 U.S. soldiers stationed there on a rotational basis. Are these bases with thousands of soldiers, nuclear missiles, and missile defense systems that can easily be converted to offensive systems not provocations? From the 1990s to the present day, the United States has unilaterally withdrawn from every nuclear arms treaty with Russia. Are these not provocations? It is clear when one examines all of these belligerent, hostile, and reckless actions and mendacious rhetoric and propaganda of the United States against President Putin and Russia, that the USA and its vassals are the aggressors and the provocateurs. In November and December of 2022, the United States said Ukraine has a right to shell and take back occupied territories, specifically Crimea. Is this not a provocation? In January 2023, the UK announced that it intended to send depleted uranium artillery shells to Ukraine. Russia considers these to be nuclear and forcefully objects, saying it will use all means necessary to counter this provocation, including nuclear. And on April 5th, 2023, the US was to expand military training for Ukraine alongside a new $2.6 billion weapons package for Kiev. Since the 2014 coup d'etat in Kiev, the United States alone has sent over $100 billion in weapons and cash to Kiev. Is this not further proof that the United States is directly involved in this war against Russia? In all of this time, the United States has been sharing real-time satellite intelligence information with Ukraine to kill Russians. Is this not further proof that the United States is directly involved in killing Russians? Also, since 2014, the US has been sending special forces troops to train Ukrainian military and Nazi battalions in Western Ukraine. Then Ambassador Jeffrey Pyatt bragged about this in a video he made showing the base and the training going on there. And training for the Ukrainian military in the United States, Canada, and NATO countries has been increased significantly in just the past year. Is this not another provocation and more proof that the United States, the EU, and NATO are directly involved in this war against Russia? The USA and the entire West are at war with Russia. Many believe, and me included, that World War III has already started because of the huge shipments of arms and billions of dollars to Ukraine. And our intelligence agencies are sharing information with them for the purpose of targeting and killing Russians. Russia is a nuclear power and has promised to defend itself with all means necessary, including its entire nuclear arsenal. It is clear as day that the Biden cabal of mediocre hacks have brought the entire world to the brink of nuclear annihilation, using the excuse that President Putin launched an unprovoked invasion of Ukraine. This lie is repeated endlessly, 24/7, in all of the Western media and out of the ignorant mouths of NATO and European vassals. This war really started during the Obama-Biden regime in 2014 under the direct involvement and encouragement of Vice President Joe Biden himself, Victoria Nuland, Ambassador Jeffrey Pyatt, and the likes of John McCain, Lindsey Graham, and other politicians who visited Ukraine. No president has ever gambled with the lives of everyone on earth. Biden and his predecessors, Reagan, the two Bushes, Clinton, Obama, and Trump, are all war criminals and belong in The Hague. The rest of the world clearly recognizes the true colors of the imperial U.S. hegemon and are now swiftly leaving the American sector. For a better world based on multipolarity, the strict observance of international law, the UN Charter, and the respect, dignity, and sovereignty of all nations.